Hey guys, Garrett McLaughlin here, and in the exercise of the week, this week, we will cover the Romanian deadlift, or what's called the RDL. So Romanian deadlift is a hip hinge type strengthening exercise for the lower body. What hip hinge means is we're focusing most of our range of motion around the hip joint, back stays flat, knees remain in a slightly bent position, but it's more so, can we drive and extend throughout the hip joint? Why this is important is for a few different reasons. First and foremost, we're developing that hip extension, which translates to that push-off or extension motion as we run. Second, it's a very good exercise to teach the body or the hips to move independently of the spine. Common thing we see with a lot of people, specifically with lower back pain, is as they go to do things, and again, trying to bend at the knees or the hips, it's so common and hard to differentiate hip motion from spine motion. So it teaches us how to engage, stabilize rib cage, spine, pelvis, and then moving the hip joints while holding the trunk and the torso in a rigid and stable position. Okay, so very good from a low back health standpoint as well. So just to show you a couple repetitions, we're actually going to break this down into a more simple form here first. If you had a foam roller, or if you have a wall, this is the simple hip hinge from a body weight standpoint. So I'm going to stand. Hopefully this works out here. I'm going to stand about 8 inches in front. I'm going to place a small bend in the knees. Exhale, rib cage down. I'm going to hinge back into the hips, and then I'm going to drive the hips forward. So you can see if you're too close, and obviously would knock that roller over. So I want enough distance that allows me to properly sit and engage into the hips and drive the hips forward. That's important because as we go into this motion, what's common for a lot of people is to start to squat, bend the knees too much. We want it to be predominantly a hip biased motion. So small bend in the knees, hinging at the hips. That allows my body to come down as I slowly come back, tap the foam roller, and then drive the hips forward to stand. Another key thing is as we're coming up and driving out of that motion, the hips are driving straight horizontally. So we don't want to think about a lot of times people think about standing up, and that's when we direct a lot of that effort around the lower back and the spine. We want to hinge, sit back into the hips, and then as we go to stand up, I'm driving the hips straight forward. My rib cage, my abs are pulling my rib cage down so I cannot arch into the lower back, and then I'm driving the hips forward to stand, and then I'm ending completely tall. We don't want to stop in a slightly bent position. I'm tall, glutes engaged, quads engaged, good posture, core. I mean, everything is really firing there at the top of that position. So hinging down through the hips, just sitting back into the butt, driving the hips forward to stand, okay? To make that more challenging, a couple simple ways. We can grab a dumbbell, we can go with a barbell, single dumbbell, 2 dumbbells. I mean, we can do this a million different ways here to add more difficulty to this one. So with a single dumbbell, starting with that dumbbell just between the feet, kind of between the toes and the ball of the foot, small bend in the knees, hinge, back is flat. We want to keep good posture. See, a lot of people just setting up for this exercise start to really lose their position of rounding. By rounding, so flattening your back out, shoulder blades back, good posture and tension throughout the spine, spine erectors, core, and then from there, driving the hips forward, small bend in the knees, hip hinge, back down. What's common and what you see for a lot of people is going through too much range of motion. At a certain point, if I go too low here, what happens there? Look at my lower back. I'm already starting to round, right? So a lot of people are in the mindset of I need to touch whatever the resistance is to the ground, whether using a barbell, using a dumbbell. They need to get all the way down. And what that is doing is causing them to go through more range of motion, and they're losing their spine position. We only want to go to a point where we're just before parallel. So I'm still slightly angled. So what that looks like is right about here. That's where I want to stop. That's where I'm at in a good position where I'm at an advantage over this movement, so I can engage and drive the hips forward to stand. If I get lower, it turns into a back motion first and then a hip motion second. We want to stay away from that, especially as we increase the resistance. So just to show you, with a couple dumbbells in the hand, exhale, rib cage down, small bend in the knees, hinge, dumbbells slide right down the shins, stopping just before parallel, driving the hips forward to stand. Should feel glutes, hamstrings, and a lot of these postural muscles throughout the spine and shoulder blades. So really a full body movement technically, because we're stabilizing the entire spine, pulling the shoulders back, lengthening through the hamstrings as we go down, getting the glute and glutes to drive the hips forward. So that's a Romanian deadlift. I always recommend on this one, start light, get the movement pattern. It's such a valuable movement pattern to get and to fully understand. Once you get that down, let's start to reduce the repetitions, make it a heavier movement. So if you're doing 10 or 12 reps to start to work down to somewhere in the 4 to 8 range repetitions, doing 3 to 4 sets of that, and really trying to bump up the resistance, because this will really translate to that power that we're driving and creating throughout the hips that really can help possibly translate over to your running in terms of faster running speeds. Again, stronger glutes, stronger hamstrings, stronger core muscles overall. But that's the Romanian deadlift. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below, give me some feedback on this video, and I hope you guys are off to a great start to your week. Thank you.